Okay, so let me welcome everybody here, our TEP colleagues, those who have taken an interest in what we do, to think with us on this very, very exciting topic that William Mpofu is going to be talking to very soon. So just to indicate how this is going to unfold, we will start with an introduction. So I will introduce William Mpofu very soon. And then after that, he will speak for 25 minutes on his topic. And then Guilherme Borges will be the discussant after those 25 minutes. So he will have, I think it's about 10 minutes. Yes, it is 10 minutes. Thereafter, we will have a question and answer session for 20 minutes. And then the remainder of the time will be really to thank everybody for being here. So without wasting much time, and here you will have to correct me, William. I thought you were Professor William Mpofu. I see it's written Dr. William Mpofu here.
Yeah, doctor is fine. Let's doctor.
Okay. All right, let's leave those out then. So if you don't mind, I would refer to you as William Mpofu. So
no problem.
Colleagues, William Jethro Mpofu is a researcher and teaching and learning coordinator at the Wits Centre for Diversity Studies in Johannesburg. He is also a research fellow at Good Governance Africa, which is in Rosebank in the same city, and he covers the Southern African region. His research interests are in philosophies of liberation of the Global South, decoloniality and decolonisation, Pan-Africanisms, world systems, and critical diversity studies. He has partnered with 15 South African universities in the transformation and decolonisation of the curriculum and the disciplines, the use of African languages in the decolonisation of higher education and epistemic diversity. Some of his articles are published by The Elephant, the Pan-African Review, Africa is a Country, News Hoax, News 24, and more outlets. He is extensively published, and here I will mention some of his books. 2021, he published Robert Mugabe and the Will to Power in an African Postcolony. And then in 2021, he published with Melissa Stein, Decolonizing the Human, Reflections from Africa on Difference and Oppression. And then he has this year a book in print. I do not know if it's out yet, William. If it is, please let us know.
Okay.
Essays in the Philosophy of Liberation. Without much ado, let's give William a chance to talk to us on this very important topic. So the floor is yours now.
Professor, thank you so much for your generous introductions and opening this platform for us to engage. And I thank you and the colleagues for making this happen. This collaboration is quite fruitful and interesting. And I want to pay my gratitude to my colleagues at the Wits Centre for Diversity Studies for the enabling collegiality and institution that they've created around myself and others. Yeah, we are definitely going to be short of time, so I'll try to run straight into my subject area. I proposed the topic Undisciplinarity towards decolonial critical dialogue between the North and the South in the university in Africa. I think Professor it would be helpful for me to begin by fleshing out my keywords so that when I begin rambling, I do not lose some of my colleagues in the audience. I will begin with the keyword undisciplinarity. What I seek to mean by that is to refer actually to what I almost called post-disciplinarity, which refers to an intellectual attitude, a philosophical attitude whereby we become impatient with disciplines, the way they've come down on us, and the kind of colonial, epistemic, and ontological baggage that they seem to come with. We need to be deliberately and intentionally unhappy with the disciplines and therefore work towards repurposing them, because maybe we've realized that they carry a lot of vestiges, a lot of residues of the colonial regime of knowledge production that was implicated in conquest, colonialism, and imperialism. I will flesh out further what undisciplinarity means according to me as we go down with the presentation. Then the other key word will be decolonial critical dialogue. What I seek to mean by that is a situation in the decolonized university where epistemologies of the South and the North, the West and the East, can find themselves in critical friction and engagement in the university, where there is no silencing of other epistemologies, like the epistemologies of the South that Santos talks about, indigenous knowledges, and knowledges from elsewhere, including the West. So a decolonial critical dialogue is a decolonial fantasy of a university setting where there is, for lack of a better term, a free market of knowledges, languages, and epistemologies in the university. I know that free market will bring to the platform other connotations which we may not be willing to engage with for now. My third keyword would be the global North and the global South, which are implicated in my topic as North and South. What I want to clarify there, Professor, is that I do not seek to simplify the terms of global North and global South as if they were strictly geographic. I seek to understand that there is a lot of the North in the South and a lot of the South in the North. So my understanding of global Southness and global Northness really seeks to expand and those perimeters and destroy the borders, because for all we know and understand and experience, the global South and the global North have so become entangled in such a way that we cannot simplify them as geographic and all that. And then I put the term the university in Africa. And I put it that way instead of the African university, because what we have that is hegemonic globally now is the Euro-American model of the university. There were other models, but the model of the university that we are all working in, whether you are in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, or elsewhere, is the Euro-American model of the university, which Ramon Grossvogel calls the westernized university. So I intentionally refer to it as the university in Africa. It's the university on African soil, but systematically and structurally, institutionally and functionally, it's a westernized university located on African soil. And that's why we should have a dialogue in this university that will decolonize this institution, this system, and this structure of knowledge until we have that dialogue of epistemologies in the universities, dialogue of sensibilities, dialogue of civilizations and histories, dialogue of cultures, and so forth, as previous scholars have mentioned. I think I'm done with the keywords, and I hope they will help me try and illuminate some of the ramblings that I'm going to make before this platform today. Prof, this monstrosity that I want to refer to it as, which is the university in Africa, and which must be decolonized to allow dialogue between North and South, is traceable to the theosophical age in the West. The theosophical age is that time where knowledge production and knowledge circulation were theological activities. Knowledge was produced from temples, synagogues, and chapels. Those were the academies and the universities at the time. This regime of knowledge production was male, religious, white, Western, and quite monologous, because any other knowledge producer could not emerge from any other circle of society and place and say, here is knowledge, here is an idea. It could be punishable by death. Well, there are cases in some parts of Western history where we can go to see how it was punishable to come with alternative knowledge that was irreligious. Socrates, for instance, you can even talk about the case of Jesus Christ and other people that were crucified, bent at the stakes for thinking otherwise. So at that time, knowledge producers and knowers were priests, pastors, prophets, and other religious officials. Other epistemologies and sensibilities were effectively silenced, criminalized at the pain of death. The Enlightenment philosophical and scientific era radically disrupted the theosophical university, but did not exhaust it. And anyway, at this juncture, I can say, if any colleagues here in the platform wish to follow up on this idea, you can consult the book by Emmanuel Wallerstein, titled World Systems Analysis and Introduction. He delves into the issues I'm talking about right now. So I'm not trying to walk on water. I'm relying on literature from previous researchers and all that. So the Enlightenment era disrupted the theosophical university radically, but it did not exhaust it, because the theosophical habits of the westernized university in the global south can still be seen. From South Africa, let me give you an illustration of, if you look at the graduation procession, the academic procession, the music that accompanies it, and how it is conducted with the mesa there being carried, and then senior professors dressed in their robes and those scary academic caps. That's a performance from the Theosophical University. Graduation ceremonies are religious ceremonies, the music and everything with it. And even university campuses in the north and in the south, you get these figurines, statues, and other ornaments that go back to that era, and they are still written in languages that now no longer exist, including Latin and all that. So not only that, even in terms of the disciplines and all that, this university still carries the habits of the Theosophical University, even over and above and after the Enlightenment. I will flesh out that as I go, I believe. So the Enlightenment era, what did it do? I think it's important, because the birth and the coming to be of the disciplines cannot be discussed and understood effectively, I think, without a visit to the Enlightenment event in that era. So the Enlightenment philosophers in the beginning challenged the theosophical era in saying that we can produce knowledge using philosophy without recourse to God, without listening to the priests, without listening to the prophets, without listening to the pastors in the synagogues, chapels, and the temples. That was a radical revolution in knowledge making and knowledge circulation. And in doing that, the Enlightenment became one of the greatest gifts, and also not such a gift to the world and to humanity. I'm saying this because it is in the Enlightenment that some of the greatest ideas on liberation, some of the greatest ideas on planetarity, peace, human rights even, were constructed and invented and circulated from the start in the Enlightenment era. But it is also in the Enlightenment episode of world history that ideas of conquest were generated, were born, and began to be circulated. The very idea of Enlightenment philosophers to say we can be masters of the universe using reason, using rationality, and using science later on. That impulse, that urge to want to master the universe included the colonial idea, included the idea of conquest, included the idea of expansionism, and actually included the anthropocentric idea of thinking that human life is above all other lives, plant life, animal life, air life, and the life of the planet, which, because of our drive to conquer the universe, we have corrupted and polluted almost beyond repair. So I really wish to register that about the Enlightenment before I go on to what exactly happened concerning the disciplines. So there was an Enlightenment dialogue, actually, after dethroning the Theosophical Academy, the Theosophical University. The Enlightenment philosophers themselves, Emmanuel Wallerstein refers to this as the greatest divorce, but it became as a dialogue in the academy that no, a group of these philosophers, because after the Theosophical age, every thinker, every knowledge producer was a philosopher. But then a group broke out and said, no, philosophy too closely resembles the Theosophical age. It's superstitious, too interpretive, and too metaphysical. What we want is knowledge production that has got evidence that can be touched, proven. So this group of Enlightenment philosophers called themselves scientists, and they dismissed the philosophers as too superstitious and much colonized by the Theosophical era. So there was a dialogue there, and which led to a divorce. Some began to call themselves scientists, others remained as philosophers. There's no time to delve into specifics, but I hope being understood. As time went on, the scientists got divided into further disciplines. That's why today you have biological sciences, physical sciences, chemical sciences, and other sciences. At the time, going back there, people like Aristotle did mathematics and humanities under one roof in one academy. It's no longer that because of the divorce and that debate that I'm referring to. Let me not be diverted. As time went on, there's another group of thinkers and knowers and knowledge producers and circulators who said, we love philosophy so much, but we hate superstition and metaphysics. We're not comfortable with it alone. We love science too much, but we are not comfortable with positivism alone and empirical evidentiation alone. We want to remain in between. We want to be scientific and also be interpretive, be exploratory, and be descriptive. So we're going to come in between these fighting camps. That was the birth of the social sciences, beginning with history studies. So the disciplines were generated from that Enlightenment divorce and Enlightenment debate. I could go on and on there. It would be a seminar on its own, but I want to save time and benefit this platform by moving forward. So there the disciplines got born. They further went on splitting, getting brands, names. As capitalism took over, they became commodities for sale. That's why now the disciplines are not funded the same in this westernized university that we're working with the sciences and the financial disciplines getting more money, with humanities being tolerated and accommodated, just like that. That's a conversation for another day, Prof. Let me jog forward to what happened with the French Revolution of 1789 to 1794, I think. It was a radical change of Western society as it was known. And that radical change produced new phenomena, new monstrosities that we still have. According to the fleshing out of Immanuel Wallerstein, the French Revolution effectively produced a new society and then produced the state as it still remains, and then produced the market as we have it. These three developments, these three products, needed disciplines to attend to them. The new society that developed after that revolution needed sociology. That's where people like Auguste Comte came in. The market needed economics. You remember in that revolution, just a few years before, Adam Smith had written what can be understood as the manifesto of capitalist economics, the wealth of nations. So economics became a discipline to attend to the market. After that, the state that had been born, birthed there as it is, needed political science to understand it and to manage it. So I'm using that illustration after Immanuel Wallerstein, actually, to show that disciplines are not born innocently. That whenever power faces changes, whenever power faces challenges, it invents disciplines. So to start with, disciplines were not born for our epistemic happiness, but for power and privilege, to manage change rather than to enable freedom, liberation, and human happiness. So there's something unhappy, something not so innocent about the disciplines. That's why I'm resorting to that illustration in order to do that. And just the same year, 1776, when Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations, there's another very interesting book which is important to empire that was published, which is Charles Darwin's The Origins of the Species, which was what can be understood as a manifesto of scientific racism and other problematics that emerge from there. So disciplines emerge within a certain climate and atmosphere of certain ideas and powerful ideas, because those were influential books at the time, as they are still now. They influence a lot of what we think about and do. Right. In the interest of time, I'll run forward again and talk about what is this? The rise, what happened with the rise of America to the status of being an empire after the Second World War, where the current World War that is happening now, only that is happening through proxies and technologies and other mechanisms, but there is a world war economically, military, and otherwise. In 1945, when America came into supremacy, which was just after 1944 when the Bretton Woods conference set and created the World Bank, IMF, and those are institutions that were supposed to lead reconstruction after the war. America was faced with a challenge of how to lead this new world that they've just won, where they'd become an empire and they'd become supreme. And what did they do? Over and above anthropology that they inherited from the Greco-Roman Empire as a discipline of understanding other societies and understanding diversity, they invented development studies, which was not invented for the development of the global south, but it was a discipline that was invented for understanding the economies of the global south and finding a way of curtailing the spread of Soviet communism and Chinese communism. So scholars like Yash Tandon and others will say it was the beginning of the development of underdevelopment of Africa in the global south, in that, as it is named development studies is not for the development of the global south, but for its underdevelopment. It was just for how to economically fortify and sustain North America as an empire and as a leader of the globe. And that war is still going on now with China coming in and all that. Let me jump forward. I hope I've illustrated the point that disciplines are not to be left unprobed, because every time power faces changes, power faces challenges, disciplines are born. And I'm saying this because in talking about decolonizing the university, decolonizing curricula, decolonizing syllabi, and decolonizing higher education in the global south, we concentrate on curricula, syllabi, systems and institutions, and forget where I think the devil really hides, which is in the disciplines. Because they are not named disciplines for decoration. They really discipline. And they produce disciples. And they put frameworks that govern how we think and all that. So we don't have to have Charles Darwin in the lecture room in South Africa and elsewhere. We don't have to have Adam Smith in the lecture room. As long as we have their disciplines, we're taken care of. So the empire builder might not be present physically in the lecture room, but if empire building methodology, if empire building theory, if empire building disciplinarity is there, empire is safe. So I might sit here from the University of the Witwatersrand and actually speak on behalf of Cecil John Rhodes with my black skin and everything else, all that, and actually believe that I'm decolonizing at some point and all that. Thank you. Right. So I hope I've trumped up the point about the disciplines and why they carry remnants, systematic and structural problematics that come from conquest, empire building, and all that, right? Dating back from before the Enlightenment up to now. And I think it might be a stage in my presentation to now mention that it's not all disciplines that might be called colonial, because as time went on, disciplines got born that could be called decolonial, like feminist studies, ethnic studies, and other studies that began to question the hegemonic canonical disciplines that came with the fathers. By the way, another problematic which I mentioned is like, it's not by accident that all these disciplines are white-born, are male-born, are Western-born, and all that. And so male, in that only one discipline is credited to a female identifying and performing person, and that discipline is nursing studies. That's why in the Academy of the Westernized University, female scholars and other gender and sexuality identifying scholars are always expected to be others. Nurses, actually, people that should be caring and getting tolerated and accommodated, but not thinkers, not knowers, not producers of knowledge. Systemically and structurally, this university has not come to terms with women and non-gender conforming people as knowledge producers and circulators of knowledge. There's a part of my presentation, which is the last part, which I love. And how am I doing on time, Prof? I want to go to the last section of my presentation.
I'm glad you asked. I was about to say we have done the 25 minutes, so we are going to give you another 5.
Thank you, Prof.
We are so enthralled by your presentation. Please carry on.
Thank you, Prof. I'm grateful for your generosity and the generosity of the colleagues here. Yeah, after talking about the monologue of the religious regime in the Theosophical University, and looking at the tyranny of the disciplines, in that every discipline believes in itself and performs in itself and talks about itself and thinks about itself. Enrique Dussel says is the pageantry of disciplines in how they love themselves and look at themselves. You find if you go into a department with a discipline, the professors are your prophets and the students are your disciples, and the discipline is being protected and it talks only about itself. Well, there have been talks about interdisciplinarity, multidisciplinarity, and all that. But when we talk about undisciplinarity, we're now talking about going over and above that in awareness of where these disciplines come from, how they were born, and how dangerous they can be ontologically and epistemically. Right. After saying that, and after demanding that we need to have a conversation, I'm sure some of you have seen graduation ceremonies in South Africa, where the religious ceremony that I described gets disrupted by students who come from certain communities and put on traditional regalia, chant traditional praise poems, and make other performances that disrupt the procession, much to the irritation of the system. Like, how can you do that in an academic procession? How can you say that in an academic procession? The vice chancellor wants to keep you and you are busy singing your ancestors' praises. That might be a small performance, but in my observation, it's a way of saying, let this way of doing things, let this way of thinking, let this way of producing knowledge have a conversation with other ways of producing knowledge. In the Theosophical University, when you graduated, you went into that ceremony, there were prayers, you get kept as if you're ordained or baptized. But a Zulu child, a Xhosa child, a Shona child, a Beti child from South Africa, Southern Africa, wants to graduate in another way, wants to think in another way, wants to present themselves in another way academically. And that's what some students have been doing. I want us to look at that as one way of undisciplining this institution and this system that we're working with. And I want it understood that when someone invokes decoloniality and undisciplinarity, get out of the propaganda by people like Professor Taiwo, who says decoloniality wants to expel white-skinned people from the university in Africa. Decoloniality wants Africans to go back to the pre-colonial past. That's propaganda. Decoloniality is demanding the kind of university that I'm about to describe in the last 3 minutes that I have. The first quality of the decolonized university in the global south and Africa, Professor, will be human diversity. Let human beings from different parts of the world meet in this institution and this system and produce and circulate knowledge. Human diversity. No exaggeration, I'm speaking from the Wits Centre for Diversity Studies. The second quality will be, I'm sprinting, Prof, epistemic diversity. Let's have Shakespeare alongside Credo Mutwa. Let's have Niccolo Machiavelli alongside Dani Nabudere. Let's have communal thinkers from the villages, knowledge producers from the communities of Africa, put forward their sensibilities and thoughts in the university, and let these thoughts have a conversation with epistemologies of the North, epistemologies of the East, and epistemologies from other directions. So human diversity will enable also epistemic diversity, which will be a decolonial virtue in this university. And the other quality, the third one, Prof, quickly, will be multilingualism. Because this university in Africa is conducted, is coached, and is performed and practiced in the colonial languages, mainly English, French, a bit of Germany, and Spanish, and all that. Right. There's one problematic with language in a philosophical and performative sense. Languages do not walk alone. They walk with bodies. So whenever certain languages of indigenous people are not integrated into the university system, curricula and syllabus and education and science, it means those bodies are literally expelled from the university. They might be present physically like I am, but if their languages are not integrated into the languages of science, the languages of knowledge, those people are only tokenized and ceremonialized and symbolized, because languages are embodied, languages are peopled and all that. Multilingualism is not impossible as long as there is what Ngugi wa Thiong'o calls the language of languages, which is translation. A student can come here and write their dissertation in Xhosa. The translation services can render it in all the languages that are available and necessary. So let us not be told that it's not feasible and all that. With political will, it is feasible. Then, fourth quality of these universities is decommoditized knowledge. Because one problem of this disciplinary university of the West in Africa is that knowledge is a commodity that is sold in the marketplace and can be afforded by those that can afford it. Those that cannot be admitted. That's why we had fees must fall, where students from this side were saying, let's have quality higher education for free, because knowledge is a public good, not only a commodity. So we need a decolonized university that has knowledge as also a public good, not just a commodity in the marketplace. And then we need a demarketized university, because this westernized university in Africa is in the marketplace. Mamdan, I think it's 2012, published a book on scholars in the marketplace. How the Bretton Woods regime, neoliberal regimes, and SAPs actually turned the university into a supermarket of degrees where the capitalist market is at play and everything is surrendered to the market forces. And the poor people of Africa that need education most cannot afford it. Right. The sixth quality will be student centricism. Away from the theosophical university led by the prophet, followed by disciples, after Paulo Freire in the pedagogy of the oppressed and education for critical consciousness, I think we need a decolonized university that is centered around the learners. The learners who are included in the education system as co-producers of knowledge, co-knowers, and co-circulators of knowledge, not those that are being instructed, being supervised, and all that. The seventh quality will be decolonized and inclusive architecture. I don't think students of the global south, which is in the north and in the south itself, will be comfortable and feel included in a university that has statues and other figurines and symbols of empire builders, of empire itself, and figurines that commemorate empire. That's why we at Rhodes Must Fall. Students of the University of Cape Town got tired of walking under the striding statue of Cecil John Rhodes. What is a conqueror? What is an empire builder doing in the university? So university infrastructure, architecture, building, besides being accessible to people living with disabilities and all that, it must not be littered with idols of empire, symbols of empire, and other sensibilities and objects that celebrate and commemorate empire. The point number 8, I'm about to end. I shopped this point from a scholar called Ariana Stokers, who wrote an interesting book in 2023 titled Reparative Universities. The university in the Global South and the Global North should be a site of repair, a site that is alive to the wounds of the past, a site that is aware of the sensibilities of those that were in the receiving end of conquest, colonialism, imperialism, and coloniality itself. So reparative in the sense that this university should understand why somebody will not be comfortable with a certain text, with a certain idea, or with a certain performance, or with a certain ceremony, or a symbol in the university, because it makes them relive the traumas of conquest, slavery, and other violences. So that university, if it's decolonized, it must be reparative. Point number 9, away from thinking that this university must be villagized, it must now be a Tswana university because it's in Botswana. No, the university must be rooted in Africa where it is located, but it must be globally relevant. And I'll use another word which is problematic but useful, also globally competitive. Because every time you raise the idea of decolonization and liberation of the university, there's the question, what will happen to quality and standards? As if including Black people, including indigenous epistemologies, and including other epistemologies means that quality and standards are going to die. Anyway, there was never a paradise of a university in the globe where quality and standards were resident. These are made and they are possible. Even if you bring indigenous languages, indigenous epistemologies, together with epistemologies from elsewhere, quality and standards can still be defended. Because every human body from any community is capable of quality and capable of standards. This university must be locally rooted, globally relevant, and globally competitive. It must combine excellence with relevance. Not be a university from the West on African soil, but a university in Africa that is African, but globally appreciable and applicable. There's a very interesting paper by Professor Robert Krige about the history of the universities in South Africa. Robert Krige is titled Shredding the Veil of Reconciliation. It talks about how universities came to South Africa specifically. These universities include Wits, where I'm seated right now, UCT, and elsewhere. Their motto was for the education of the sons of empire, not daughters, not Black people, not any other people, but the sons of empire. They were meant to produce further colonizers. That's why they were funded by the landlords, empire builders, the Bate Foundation, Cecil John Rhodes, and others. And they went on to be not universities on their own, but they were called college campuses because they were affiliated to Western universities. So that structure of knowledge production, that structure, that system of knowledge production is not entirely gone in the argument of Robert Krige. Our universities here still have that colonial hangover where they were originally meant for the education of the sons of empire. That's why the statues of empire builders, of slave owners, and colonizers are still found littered around university campuses in the African continent and the global south.
I'm afraid this is where I'm going to.
Thank you. The last
I've
point.
already given you 15 more minutes, but please wrap up.
This university must be undisciplinary. It must be dialogical. And it must really be a vivid site of epistemic and human diversity. Thank you, Professor, for your generosity and the colleagues for your indulgence. I thank you so much.
Thank you so much, William. As always, yeah, you give us food for thought, and really it was just to allow others time to engage with your ideas. and perhaps share with us their own ideas on the subject. We could have gone on listening to you. So let's shoot straight into Guilherme Borges, who is going to be a discussant for the next 10 minutes. Thereafter, we will all chip in. Guilherme, it's over to you now.
Okay, thank you, Tabisani. Also, I would like to begin by thanking Christy for the opportunity to be part of this seminar, and of course, by congratulating you, William, for your very compelling presentation. Your effort to unpack what you call an epistemic monologue that structures the contemporary hegemonic university system. That effort is not only necessary, it's actually urgent. And not only for political purpose, but also for analytical reasons, strictly analytical reasons also. As a researcher working in the Brazilian university system that is generally called as part of the Global South, I could identify many of the dynamics you described as present in the context I engage with. Well, there are so many things that I would like to highlight in your presentation, and I don't have much time, but I think it's important to say that your talk really connected with my own experience, especially when I think about how even in places where diversity is often celebrated, we still face the persistence of European and North American ways of producing knowledge. The disciplines which, as you point out, discipline us, function as technologies of power that organize and authorize what is worth knowing. And I think it's important to highlight that. And I think it's important to see that in doing so, these disciplines not only marginalize, but also they domesticate epistemologies, epistemologies that fall outside their frameworks. In the Brazilian context, this can be seen, for example, in how school subjects and academic disciplines often struggle to really engage with indigenous and Afro-Brazilian knowledge that don't fit into European and North American canons. Even when these knowledges, these indigenous knowledge, these Afro-Brazilian knowledge, even when they are addressed, they are often filtered and contained through dominant disciplinary grammars. Together with Professor Paula Monteiro, who is here with us today, I have been looking in our researches at how public schools and universities in Brazil deal with the concept of Ubuntu. And what we have seen is that this concept of Ubuntu is often abstracted and domesticated by epistemic filters that reproduce a Christian moral logic, you know? In Brazilian educational and academic circles, there is an ethical reification, so to speak, of what Ubuntu is taken to mean. And well, I would really like to have the chance to discuss this further with you. I think it's a phenomenon, this domestication of the Ubuntu concept. It's a phenomenon that I could understand much more deeply through the critical lens you have offered us today. But besides this domestication of Ubuntu in Brazil, a second point your presentation made me think about is when you say that being Black and African doesn't prevent a scholar from reproducing and performing white European and North American epistemic sensibilities. And I think this observation is very interesting, and it compels us to broaden our understanding of what representation means in academic context. And in Brazil, I'm always talking about my Brazilian background, but I think it's important to have this dialogue between our backgrounds. But in Brazil, we have seen the expansion of policies aimed at increasing access and inclusion of Black and indigenous students, professors, and researchers in public universities. And these policies of inclusion have sparked very important national debates, but far less attention has been paid to curricular and epistemic changes that would make room for Black and indigenous knowledge in universities. And during your talk, you made me reflect on how greater ethno-racial diversity among researchers is, of course, welcome, but it doesn't in itself ensure a structural transformation in the modes of knowledge production, and it doesn't ensure an epistemic shift in our space of enunciation, you know? So as I said, I think your reflections lead us to broaden our understanding of what representation means in university context. And you made me think that it's not only about including new social actors, but also about embracing new ways of understanding social reality. And I think it's very interesting that you conclude your presentation with the image of a decolonized university, and I see this imaginative scenario as a valuable prompt to think not only in utopian terms, but also in relation to everyday practice. I mean that beyond the final image of a decolonized university, perhaps we might turn our attention to small, partial, contextualized acts taking place inside the university structure itself, in curricula, in teaching methods, in the authors we engage with, and in the ways we listen to marginalized voices. But this leads to a difficult question, at least difficult for me. And how can we sustain spaces of epistemic dissent that are not imaged, that are not like recaptured by hegemonic disciplinary logics, you know? And further, how can we foster the formation of students, researchers, and professors who seek to break away from this epistemic monologue without simply reproducing a new canon of exclusion. And I will close my talk actually with these questions. And thank you once again for your fascinating presentation, William. I hope we can contribute even like in a small way to opening cracks through which other analytical interpretations and even other life stances might flourish.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, for that most astute response to the talk. We have run out of time, but because we started 5 minutes late, I'm thinking, with your permission, let us take 10 minutes of comments and questions. If there are comments, please make them very crisp. Same applies to our questions. Let's get to the point. So let's see how we do in those 10 minutes. Are there any hands? It doesn't look like we have any. Would you like then, William, to respond to some of the questions that Gabni was asking?
Sorry, Tabisani, there is a question in the chat from Becky.
So Becky says, to what extent did the 1648 Treaty of Westphalia, which separated the state from the church, contribute to the chronology of events you outlined? So as you respond to Guilherme's questions, please also respond to the one that Becky is asking.
Prof, can I don't know how to put my hand up here, but can I
Is that
ask a quick, it's Les, yeah. Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
Thanks, William. That was a super interesting presentation and absolutely spot on. Well, I think your periodization, etc., excellent. What I'm interested in is the absolute current moment that we're in right now, where there seems to be some level of disarticulation between some of the forces that were converging in your conversation. And you kind of provocatively suggested maybe we're in the Third World War already, etc. So I would be very interested to see if there's fracture. Well, there seems to be fracture in all kinds of areas, and where the university is situated, at least in terms of a kind of modernist paradigm where the functionality of the disciplines in including people in a certain kind of economy and society and structure of hierarchy seems to kind of be breaking down in certain kinds of way. Anyway, I'm sure you've thought about that, and I'd be fascinated just for a couple of thoughts on that.
Thank you so much, Les, for that. William, if you don't mind, please.
Thank you, Prof, for this continuing platform, and my colleague Guilherme for his fruitful discussion. I was taking notes because I intend to develop a short paper for circulation. Right. I'll respond to Guilherme's question after my response to Prof. Ngomezulu's question. To what extent did the 1648 Westphalian moment contribute to some of the events or episodes that I referred to? I've always preferred to look at 1648 in Westphalia after that 30 Years' War as an episode where Europeans said, why are we continuing to fight? Let's stop this. Let's go out there and conduct conquest, colonialism, and all that. It was an incoming together of the European idea and European people, at least their elites, their leaders there, bound together by a certain will to power and a certain appetite for wealth and resources. That kind of discovering and finding each other was not extended to the colonial world. That kind of saying, let's not do war on each other, was not extended to other parts of the world. So it was unlike the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885, which suspended the Westphalian sensibility, the Westphalian moment, to say, these are native locations rich with resources, let us slice them up. Germany go there, France go there, United Kingdom go there, and all that. So if you put alongside each other the Berlin Conference and the Conference of Westphalia, you realize the will to power of conquests, in that this was maybe following certain drives, certain appetites, certain fears, and certain desires that some people in some places were expelled from the human and consigned to natural resources that can be divided amongst powers, separated and all that. And we have borders, we have maps and all that today. By the way, disciplines themselves are kind of epistemic borders in that they create parameters, they create blinkers, and I'm grateful that Decolonial was able to capture that. I'm much interested in your suggestion that we need to look at the domestication of Ubuntu and its understanding and utilization and all that. It's going to be an interesting and very big debate because as you intimated, Ubuntu has been narrowed to some kind of religious, eschatological, and other ideas, when it is much wider and maybe much deeper. And you know how this happened is because during the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of South Africa, one of the leaders of the commission was Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who was himself throughout the proceedings, and he invoked Ubuntu from his locus of initiation and positionality as an archbishop of the Anglican Church. So he circulated this proverb that Ubuntu ngumuntu ngabantu, which means a person is a person because of other people. Since then, even scholars in the academy, in this university of ours and everywhere, have taken Ubuntu to be summarizable and compressible to that proverb. Yet Ubuntu has many other proverbs besides that one. Proverbs about war, proverbs about justice, proverbs about reconciliation, proverbs about living together, and proverbs about sharing land and sharing space and not waging war and all that. But I was really intrigued in that you picked up the religiousization, the Christianization of Ubuntu. I think it began in one of those moments where we now think of Ubuntu as just this sweet piece of pie and all that. It's a complex and important phenomenon that needs to be understood and all that. Right, and about the present moment and what is happening and my understanding, thank you. There is this thing like disorder as an opportunity. The motivational speakers say every crisis is an opportunity not to be wasted. I think this helter-skelter, this arrangement and the dissensus within those that are talking about decolonization and decoloniality, it constitutes an opportunity to think and provides us with material on which to make observations, arguments, and conclusions. By the way, part of the undisciplinarity that I'm talking about and the aspiration for this university of the future is exactly what we are doing here. Because right here, we're having a conversation across borders, across disciplines, across locations, and all that. It's not only a starting point, but a way of continuing the pursuit of the decolonized university. Yeah, I like one of the two sayings that I've enjoyed looking at and using. The first one is by Chairman Mao on he said, there's great disorder under the heavens. The situation is excellent, which means every disorder, every crisis, and every confusion is an opportunity for excellent thinking and excellent activism. And finally, Hannah Arendt said in one of the chapters in The Human Condition, spoke about the intersection of vita activa and vita contemplativa, which means the life of reflection and the life of activism should somehow find each other, because thoughtless action is not helpful as much as actionless thought is not helpful. So I think what we're doing here is part of the journey towards that aspiration of a decolonized university that is dialogical and not monological, and where there's human diversity, multilingualism, and epistemic diversity and all that. And I really want to say thank you so much for involving me in this, and I hope you will continue to let me know when other conversations are coming so that I can participate and be there to witness and benefit. Thank you so much.
We thank you so much, William. And the message we are taking, let's be unhappy with the disciplines. Colleagues, I think we've come to the end. We have stretched it a little bit, but we are glad you could stay for this long. So catch us again, either for a masterclass or for another seminar. We will publicize these as times draw near. So with that having been said, we've come to the end of this session, and thank you all.